Um, so hi everybody, as you can see, we're trying something new today, and so far it's been really a lot of fun working with Jill and Miles to use this technology so that we are transmitting to you live from J-Sei using technology from Facebook, boo. But otherwise, I think it's brilliant. I'm really impressed with it. So everybody, I don't have any initial announcements, so we can get right into our program. Sitting next to me is Yuriko Gamo Romer, who's going to be our special guest tonight. So we have some really special things we're going to do tonight. I hope most of you or some of you were able to watch Mrs. Judo on your own. If not, we'll put in the link at the end of this program, and you can watch the film on Vimeo through this weekend. So I hope you'll get a chance to see it if you haven't seen it yet. Also, all through tonight, we're going to be showing you short films and bits and pieces from works that are currently in production. So you'll get a chance to see some things that some people haven't seen at all. We're seeing it for the very first time. So we're pretty lucky. I'm really excited. So let me just offer a brief introduction first, and then we'll get chatting. Yuriko Gamo Romer is an award-winning director based in San Francisco. She holds a master's degree in documentary filmmaking from Stanford University and is a Student Academy Award winner, National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Scholar, and American Association of Japanese University Women Scholar. In June 1999, she started Flying Cart Productions, and we'll be talking about her work all evening. So welcome, Yuriko.
Thank you.
It's really exciting to have you here. So I think one really kind of nice way to let people sort of get to know you a little bit is, I hope you don't mind, we'd like to show a short film that you made called My Immigrant Story. And it's really wonderful. So maybe if we can set that up and just watch that, and I think that'll give you a nice sense of Yuriko, and then we can talk from there.
Two significant things happened for my family that year. I was born, and the Russians launched Sputnik. 1 year later, we moved to America. Sputnik launched the space race. America responded. And my father was recruited as one of many research scientists. Our summers were spent touring universities, observatories, and research centers. Lucky for me, these trips took us all around the country, to places that inspired me to find my own calling. The science gene skipped me a whole generation. But now my son is studying science and aiming for the stars. is just one of billions upon billions of stories. How many shining stars will never reach us if we wall off our borders?
We're back. So that was a really terrific clip. Yuriko, can you tell us just a little bit about how that project came about? That was recently from 2018, right?
Yes. So CAM has a special program where anybody out there that has home movies that need to be digitized and transferred, they'll transfer them for you, and it's called Memories to Light. But anyways, I had a big box of home movies that my father had shot, and they were all 8mm films, and hadn't looked at them for ages. And I've been meaning to have CAM transfer them. And then after the 2016 election, the documentary filmmakers of the Bay Area made this call out there, we need to respond to what's going on, and made a call to all of us to make films. Short films is what. So I thought, well, every day the word immigration was all over the newspapers, and I happen to be an immigrant. So I thought I would take that little push to do something. And I edited my dad's films together and just made a little bit about, because it's a weird story. Like, most people don't come here because the Russians launched Sputnik. So anyways, that was my little thing, and that's why I made that.
Wow. So I have one comment that struck me right away watching this is you have a beautiful voice. I mean, have you ever done any voice work? I mean, you did such a nice job of narrating. Have you thought about narrating some of your other pieces?
My voice gets put into things every once in a while, but mostly because I want to do my own personal narration. Once upon a time, I used to work in an ad agency, and I did end up doing a bunch of scratch tracks, and so that's why I think I kind of knew, okay, I mean, I could never act, but if I needed to read a little bit of something, it's helpful just to, I don't have to hire someone to, I can just read something and get the timing and cadence and stuff, and usually it's then recorded by somebody else, but in this case, obviously it was my story, so I did it.
Wow. And then the other thing that struck me was that these were movies that your dad took. Do you think that instilled in you any kind of a bug to use a camera or anything like that?
I don't know about that, but honestly, my undergraduate degree is from UCLA, and I studied art. And I went to UCLA where there's a big film school, and I never once took film class. So I didn't really think about the film part of it until after I was working in advertising, and we were making commercials, and I got interested in that as a medium. And then so I kind of circled back around, and I thought, oh, you can make more than 30 seconds worth of film. So that's kind of how I came to becoming documentary.
Well, so how exactly did you transition from advertising to this?
Well, honestly, I think I reached a point where I was feeling like I wanted to do something more contributive to society than just selling things, and also 30 seconds, 60 seconds, not very long to actually tell a story. And I had some opportunities to work on nonfiction projects within the advertising world, and I became more and more interested in what you could do with it. And then I had a couple opportunities to work on documentaries, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'd like to do this. So.
Mm-hmm. But then you went to Stanford?
Yeah, Stanford has this little tiny documentary film program. And I had gotten interested in here in San Francisco, and I took a night class at San Francisco State, and Jay Rosenblatt was teaching the class, who's like really, really talented filmmaker, but he's the one that said, hey, there's this program down at Stanford, and I had no interest in going back to grad school, but I went down just to meet the professors, and that's how I ended up going to their program.
Great. I want to remind everyone that if you have any questions for Yuriko, please put them in the chat. Jill is moderating and she's watching all of your comments and questions. So if at any point there's something you want to say or ask Yuriko, please put it in the chat. But we'll move on, and just to kind of set the stage for the next video we're going to watch, it does seem like something you're really interested in, and that's kind of a theme of your work, is US-Japan relations. And that showed up a little bit in your My Immigrant Story. So do you want to say a little bit more about that to set up our next video, Friendships?
Well, so I was born in Japan. I don't much remember living here because I was like a year and a half old when I came over here. But, well, like a lot of the people that are on here today, there's an interest in Japan and the US. So, you know, I'm not going to pretend that it's not obvious that that's sort of what I'm drawn to. And the next thing that's going to be shown is I was asked to do this. A friend of mine was the executive director for the 2010 grassroots homestay exchange between Japan and the US. It goes back and forth, and it is based in the descendants of John Manjiro and the descendants of Captain Whitfield. Created this homestay program, and we needed a way to explain to all the participants what the origin is of the program. So my friend had asked me to put together a video, and it's a story that goes back to 1841, I think it was, when he first set sail and got shipwrecked. So I had to create something out of no footage. Anyways, you'll see, we sort of, in a very short video, explained the origin of the story, which this story of John Manjiro gets taught in all history lessons in Japan, but not here in the United States. Hardly anybody knows this story. So, and it's a fascinating story, and I mean, hopefully someday I'll be able to make a longer piece of this, because it's just like a little teaser. But anyway, so great.
Well, let's take a look at that, and then we can talk about it, because it's kind of a technical marvel as well, but a great story. So let's watch Friendships.
Long, long ago, in the village of Tosa, in southern Japan, a boy named Manjiro went fishing. He sailed off with 4 fishermen and had good luck finding fish. But suddenly they found themselves caught in a storm. They were being washed away from Japan by a current. The Tokugawa shogunate had closed Japan off from the rest of the world. No one was allowed in, and those who left were not allowed to return. The small boat was battered and torn, and the fishermen huddled together for days, wondering their fate. Then they saw something. It was but a tiny island of craggy rock cliffs, but it was hope of survival, so they swam to the island. They found a cave and somehow survived for months. One day, they saw something on the horizon. Was it their imagination? It came closer. It was a miracle, and Manjiro swam out to the boat. Soon they were taken aboard a big ship. The John Howland was a whaling ship from America. Suddenly they were filled with fear, but Captain Whitfield was so kind and took care of them. Manjiro was curious and learned English quickly. Soon he could communicate with the sailors from the faraway land. He also learned about whaling and navigation. Captain Whitfield took a liking to Manjiro, and he invited Manjiro to sail back to Fairhaven, Massachusetts with him. Knowing there was no chance of going home to Japan, Manjiro accepted and sailed off to America for the very first homestay. Fairhaven was a world Manjiro could not have imagined. He fared well there, He went to school and learned much about this new world. He even went off on another whaling journey. Still, he longed to go home to see his mother. One day he heard the news about the California gold rush. From his whaling work, he'd earned enough to make his way to California. Eureka! Manjiro struck gold. With enough gold in his pockets, he began his journey back home to Japan. When he neared the coast of Japan, he launched the whaling boat he had purchased and rowed his way back to Japan. At first, he was taken into custody, but finally he was allowed to go home, and at long last, Manjiro saw his mother again. Before long, Manjiro was summoned by the Japanese government. They needed his language skills. Japan was meeting with Commodore Perry to negotiate the opening of Japan's seaports. Manjiro became a hero and was made a samurai. In 1860, he boarded the Kandin Maru to return to America. As an official interpreter, Manjiro was part of the first ambassadorial mission to America. After their time in San Francisco, the delegation traveled to Washington, D.C. Then in 1870, Manjiro made his way back to Fairhaven and reunited with Captain Whitfield. This auspicious relationship has lived on for many generations and continues today as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of the arrival in San Francisco of the Kandin Maru and the Powhatan, and to open the 20th America-Japan Grassroots Summit.
So much. I want the Manjiro puppet. I want one. So I hope you do get to make like a feature film and then sell all kinds of merch.
My cousin would love that because she's the one who made those dolls.
So that's what I want to hear more about, because like you just made this stop motion animation film out of nowhere, right? So can you talk a little bit about how that came about?
It was kind of a crazy project, but I realized that we had to find some way of telling the story. And I had this idea that animation would make it more interesting. And my cousin and I had been talking about doing some kind of animation with her puppets. I think in Japan they've done some with some of her stuff, but I had really wanted to do something where we were working together. So she made the Manjiro and the Captain Whitfield. And Manjiro came with change of clothes. So we had the one puppet we could change his clothes and turn him into samurai, into the gold rush. Anyways, I still have it on my bookshelf at home, and it has wires in it. And I had never done a stop motion, so it was all a big experiment. But you just move the little arms and legs, and then actually I got help from Tomo Okada, who knew how to do the software to help you sort of smooth that out and stuff. And it's really just a tiny bit of animation, but even just that little bit of movement sort of gives it life. So but it's like so much work. And then I had other friends do the background illustrations. Yes. And beautiful. And we actually shot it on a green screen.
You had puppets in front of a green screen.
So we have one question. Where's Manjiro buried?
I believe he's buried in San Francisco.
Really?
I've heard that he's somewhere in San Francisco, but somebody would have to verify that.
Yeah.
Somebody want to Google
Someone
that
should
background.
Google that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know. That is fascinating. So, and who did the research for this? or did the families provide that to you?
Well, it was sourced from a couple of books, the children's book, and some of the illustrations in there, the ones that look like old, with calligraphy on the side, those are actually, I think they're copies from Manjiro's original diaries, where he had done illustrations. And back then, there wasn't a lot of like reproduction of photographic printing and all that stuff. So I think that there's several copies, and a couple of them sit in museums on the East Coast, and I think they were all hand copied. So there are a few illustrations in there that are from this historical. I think it was one's in Pennsylvania, I think, and one's in Fairhaven. But there is like a little museum in Fairhaven.
There is?
Yeah.
And Judo?
Well, I think I'm not sure what it's called. I should know. But they took Whitfield's original home or some structure of that sort and turned it into. There is an organization that is kind of, they're committed to sort of preserving that history and stories. And as I said before, in Japan, everybody learns this in their history books, but people don't really know the story here. But it's so filled with drama that it's one of those, almost nobody could make up a story like this. And there's a shipwreck, and then he goes to the United States, and he like lives with this family in Massachusetts, and he learns English, and then he goes back and he goes to the gold rush and finds gold, and then he goes back to Japan and he gets arrested. It's all filled with all kinds of drama.
I love the part where, instead of just going cross country, he like goes all the way around South America.
That's what you had to do back.
So one of our audience members Googled, or knows this information that in 1871, Manjiro suffered a mild stroke, which for the most part ended his public life. On November 12, 1898, he died at the home of his son, Toichiro, in Tokyo at the age of 71.
Oh, okay, so I was wrong.
According to his wishes, he was buried in a Shinto ceremony at the Yoshigaya Cemetery in Tokyo.
Okay, so I made up the San Francisco.
Well, it's going to be your movie.
Well, if I actually do the longer version, I obviously will have to do some more historical research.
And there's another question. Why do you think the story is taught and so well known in Japan and neglected here? It's a good question.
I can't answer that, except that it's obviously a big deal in Japan because it is the beginning of connecting really the United States. I mean, it's the first stay exchange. And if anyone's interested, they do this. And I think it got paused for a couple years during COVID, but they go back and forth between Japan and the United States. And it's the CIE Grassroots Homestay Exchange. But I think if you look up John Manjiro, Captain Whitfield, then it will come up, and I'm sure we can get you the info if you want to like send it out to everybody. But it's a chance to go to Japan from the United States and have homestay, and I think you're very much a VIP, and in whatever town that they do this in. But I think in the United States, I don't think it ever got like turned into like a piece of history because people didn't really know about it. And I mean, it's really not as much about American history. Mm-hmm. It's more about sort of Japanese history and how it connects to the United States. But I think it's a great piece of history, so it would be nice for people to know it a little bit.
Yes. At the JCCC, Paul Osaki always gives his Manjiro speech.
Oh, he does.
And especially when the youth have an exchange, mm-hmm. They go to Japan or they receive visitors from Japan. So he loves telling the Manjiro story that no one knows.
We got to get this story out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also up till now, Hollywood and publishing, they're not as interested in sort of the ethnic side of things, right? Like according to Hollywood, Tom Cruise single-handedly opened up Japan, right? Yeah, and probably in the movie version, Tom Cruise would have to play Whitfield or something, you know, they would have to have some big movie star. No, not in your movie, but in the Hollywood version. So it kind of doesn't surprise me that it didn't get as much attention here, but you're right, it's such a great story.
I think there's probably more of an interest in sort of media in general and in Hollywood maybe and TV and stuff to tell these kinds of stories, because there is a lot more interest in telling Asian history and Asian stories. So
thank goodness. Yeah, yeah. So we're kind of moving on to our next topic, which it sort of continues the US-Japan connection, but then it introduces another dimension that's of interest in your films, which is sports. And so, and you know, with the Olympics scheduled to start next Friday, which we think, right?
Yeah.
Like, we think it'll start.
It'll start, no one will be there.
I know, poor Japan. So we're going to move on to our Mrs. Judo conversation. And again, I'd love to find out how many people watched the film, if you watched it this week or if you saw it before. Love to hear that in the comments. Or yeah, I see a raised hand there. Yay, good. So if you have any questions, put questions in the chat. But what we thought we'd do is, for some of you who might not have seen the film yet, we'll show you the trailer, which will give you a good feel for it. And then we're going to follow it up with like a really special event that I'm going to ask Jill to talk a little bit about too. So if we could see the Mrs. Judo trailer.
フランス行きました時には全国から集まった人たちが80ばあさんが何ができるもんかっていう噂が出たっていうんですね。で私は投げ技40本ですから全部 やって済ませました。80でも結構動けるわけですね。I was 21 years old at that time, and Kano sensei started, and we have in the Kodokan women section. So therefore, please come. I heard that I do nothing give to questions.
加納先生はその時代としては女性が足を見せることさえできなかった時代に柔道着を着せて、すごく激しいことを加納先生は女性にいち早くやらせた。
One day, Judo sensei from Japan, a woman, was coming, taking a tour of various dojos in Northern California. And I decided it'd be very interesting to do a demonstration at Mills College. She offered Keiko a job on the spot to teach at Mills College.
それが私のもう結婚するか、それとも柔道で生きるかっていうことで、それで柔道に決めて、それがこんなに長いとは思わなかった。
Time finally to meet Keiko Fukuda. She has the distinction, and it is a distinction, of having just become the only woman in the world to earn the highest honor in judo. She's a 10th degree black belt. Not bad for a woman who's only 4 foot 10 inches tall and weighs only 100 pounds. Oh, and who's 98 years old.
So I'm so excited that we get to see Mrs. Judo or share it again and share it with the J-Sei audience. I had the opportunity to work with Yuriko on some promotional aspects of screening Mrs. Judo and sharing it with different communities, and we got to take it all over the place. It was really quite special, but every time I watch the film, it still brings tears to my eyes, and I never got to meet Sensei. No, so people always want to know, like, did she get to see the film? How did she feel about, when you made the film?
Well, I feel like I had the honor and the privilege of getting to know her over, I guess it was like 5 or 6 years. But she lived for almost a year after the film came out. And probably the thing that I remember the most is our premiere screening at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. And it was a sold out Cam Fest screening that was packed in there. And we were scheduled to go up to do the Q&A on stage, and she was going to come up. And so right as she was walking up, a couple of her students were helping her go up onto the stage. I was behind her, and I heard her sobbing. And I thought, oh my God, is she okay? So I asked her, one of her top students, and I said, is she all right? And she said, yeah, she's fine. She's just very emotional because she just saw this on the big screen. And so she got up on the stage, and so once we kind of like got settled in, we started talking to her, and she had so much to say, and she just started, telling us her stories and saying things, and she was speaking in Japanese, and we didn't have a translator, and all of a sudden I was up there going, trying to keep up with her. Meanwhile, I couldn't see anybody out there because they had their stage lights on us, but it was very emotional for her. But I think she got to go to like 4 screenings in the Bay Area, and she was very just touched by the idea that her life legacy that she had committed to for her whole life was gonna see more. They were gonna see more people and live on beyond her life. And so she thanked me for the making film, which was really touching for me. It was just, and I remember the first time we shared it with, she does this annual women's judo camp thing, which is still going on without her, obviously. But we showed the film to all the women that were at the camp. And people started coming up to me and telling me their stories. And I said, she's here, go tell her the story. And suddenly, there was 30 women all in line waiting to talk to her. And there was not a dry eye in the room. Everyone was sobbing, and she got to sit there and hear all these women thank her and tell her the stories of what they've been able to accomplish because of judo. And I mean, it was just really a touching thing. And I think she really enjoyed it and loved it. And she certainly felt validated for spending her whole life to do this. So.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I feel like I met her because I've seen your film, and it's so heartfelt, and it feels like she's present right there. Tell us about that Japan trip when you traveled to Japan with her.
Oh, right. Okay. So she had told me when I first met her that she knew she was never going back to Japan, and she had, she was fine with that. She knew she was too old to travel, and that was fine. And then this opportunity came up where the younger judo sensei that's on there, Yamaguchi sensei, she had wanted Fukuda sensei to come back to Japan and sort of reap the rewards of everything she'd accomplished abroad. And she had created this whole trip. And, for a while it was on, it was off, it was on again, and finally got all worked out. So, obviously I had to go, and it was 10 insane days of filming, not only her, because we were following her around, but, I had to interview other people and schedule them in between. And it just seemed like her energy level just went up and up as we were meeting people and getting together, I mean, she had a little family reunion. She hadn't seen most of these people in ages, and then she was basically honored by the Judo organization and finally given the credit that she was due, and it was really lovely to see that happen.
So we have some comments and questions, but first I want to ask Jill, what's your connection to this film?
Oh, so my connection was to help Yuriko with, I think you got a Cal Humanities grant to share it in the community, the Japanese American community especially. And yeah, it was really a wonderful opportunity. I got to know Yuriko. I know your sister Kay through Sansei Legacy Project, I think. And then Mark, who you've been working with. I worked on another film with him, The Power of Two. So it's kind of how our
I've been doing some work on my other film too.
Oh yes, for a later story. So Diamond Diplomacy, I got to do some work with that. But anyways, it's really wonderful. Should I introduce that clip now, and then I'll let you come back and
Yeah, and then maybe we can.
and then you can answer those questions.
Talk about the comments and questions.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we tee that up?
Okay, so the clip you're going to see is from a presentation we did at the Asian Art Museum. It was really a wonderful opportunity. I invited Wendy Hanamura to come in and be our host, and Yuriko reached out to Marty Malloy. So tell them who Marty is.
Oh, Marty Malloy is a local Bay Area judoka, and she, I think it was, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was Summer Olympics, maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah, and she was training under Yoshi.
No, it would have been 12 years ago. Yeah, and she was training with Yoshi Uchida in San Jose, and she won the bronze medal, I think, in her lightweight division or something like that. But she's still in the Bay Area.
Yeah, so it was really fun to have her. And you can watch the clip and we can talk more about it. Okay, thanks.
I want to welcome you. And it's a wonderful evening. Not only are you going to see a spectacular new film by Yuriko Romer, but we're going to hear from a scholar. We're going to meet a bronze Olympic medalist in judo. We're going to meet the filmmaker and hear the backstory, and also meet the woman who has taken on Sensei's legacy and is carrying on her work at the dojo. But we thought it might be wonderful first to get you into the art of judo, the gentle art of judo. I understand, I learned just tonight that judo means the gentle way.
So every movement has a purpose, and it's the minimum possible to achieve the effect. And that was an uranagi lift. Again, Tori steps back, but then she turns that into an attack. And there's a whole series of subtle movements going on in this technique. And finally, there's an arm bar and a choke.
The gentle way for me refers more to the principles of judo that you heard about in the film, maximum efficiency, minimum effort, where the idea is that if I were to push you, in order to stop yourself from falling backwards, you would lean into the push. And when you lean into the push, I turn and throw you in the direction that you're leaning. So I've just achieved the biggest effect with the least amount of effort. All I had to do was give you a little shove to make you off balance yourself. So I think when people talk about judo being the gentle way, that's what they're referring to. It's getting the most out of the least.
And so one thing I think Fukuda sensei really embodied was to be centered in oneself and be very balanced in oneself. And that's the way to go. And then if you're attacked, if someone comes at you, you can use that energy, but it doesn't have to turn into something destructive. And her way of teaching was about empowering other people.
And I think that she realized that, she made a decision in a moment, and it wasn't one of those things where you go, okay, I'm choosing judo, I'm not going to marry this guy, and I'm going to live a solo life, and I'm going to do it for 77 more years. I mean, it was just, it was not that kind of a decision. It was, in the moment, I want to do judo, and I don't want to give it up, so I'm going to move this way. And for her to sort of feel that emotion of, oh my God, at that moment, I set the destiny of the rest of my life, and here I am, well into my 90s. But she so loved judo, and she was probably one of the most fulfilled people that I've ever met in my entire life. It's like nobody can say, okay, someday I'm going to be a 10th degree black belt. I mean, it's like saying, okay, someday I'm going to climb Mount Everest.
Myself, I doubt that in my life, which I will never stop doing judo as long as I'm alive, I doubt I would ever even reach that level. To become that high of a rank, you have to have pretty much a basic expert fundamental understanding of the sport, what it means, what it represents, how it's done. The fact that she was so well versed in kata and in judo in general kind of shows you how deep her knowledge really goes. She was the only woman to ever reach that rank, and she had to fight for that too. I mean, they wouldn't give it to her easily.
If Fukuda Sensei was in the room with us tonight, what would she want every one of these people to walk away with? What would her message be?
I would say if in the film there is one small clip that mentioned that Fukuda Sensei was saying that judo is not just a technique that you could throw. She repeated over and over again, be a very good human being. So I would say that she wants us to know and continue to be gentle, be strong, be gentle, and also be beautiful, is as a human being.
So we're back. I'm really glad that we showed that panel discussion, because I think it does sort of widen the breadth, that what she accomplished was more than just that little space of judo, like it reached out, and it was important on a number of levels. How should we do this? Do you want to read comments?
Sure. So one comment from Susan is that she sent the link to Yosh Uchida, and he watched it, enjoyed seeing it again, and he didn't fall asleep, and he just turned 100 this year.
Oh, that's right. It was his
birthday. Yeah, great to hear that. And another comment was from Eileen. She said it saddened me to see her cry when she talked about sacrificing marriage and family for judo. And it's touching how a beloved sensei is so honored in Japan, and the idea of the acolyte comes to mind.
I think she had a question too. Do you know if this showed on NHK or in Japan?
As far as I know, it has not broadcast in Japan. It has a distributor in Japan, and I don't hear very much from them. But I do know that they did a big push to get it out to women's organizations and kind of in like the universities and the educational. And honestly, I wish I knew a little bit more about who has seen it, but they had a very difficult time in the beginning when the distributor took it over, because it was right when the women's judo team, the Olympic, like the national team, came out and publicly confronted that they had been physically abused during their training. And so the judo organizations in Japan, and at that point it was all men. So, they were kind of this, we don't want to have anything to do with anything that talks about women's judo. So I know this distributor had a very hard time. And it took them well over a year before they kind of got some traction on it. And I went to Japan there was a big press screening to kind of announce it and get people excited about it. And at that point, there definitely was some buy-in from the professional judo organizations. And Yamashita Sensei, who was a gold medalist from, I don't even know what year it was, but he's a big celebrity in Japan, and he came and spoke during the press screening. So they were very happy that he was there. And I was kind of milling around after the screening, and there were loads of male judo sensei in the audience, and I heard several of them talking about how there was such a focus in Japan about you have to win medals, you have to win your competitions, you know, the medals thing, you know, it's medals, gold medals. And they felt like they didn't have the space any longer to teach the kind of the philosophical aspects of it. And so in the film, she talks about how, you know, if at the end of your life, all you can say is, I did this maneuver well and that one well, you know, I want you to be able to talk about how you became a better human being, or, you know, so that was touching for me to hear these male sensei saying, almost like they had to push that aside because they weren't allowed to acknowledge that part of judo. And I think they were sort of given this moment of reprieve on that, like, oh, this is okay, we need to do this. So I don't know if it's shifted the teaching, especially by men instructors and sensei in Japan, but hopefully it was, even if it's just a little bit of a movement, it's a good thing, I think. So.
Yeah, that is great, because that is a really important aspect of judo. Right? I will also point out that I think when I was researching this, I read that the Japanese women's team has won more medals.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So go girl. So girl power. I just wanted to do a little girl power there.
So there's another question. At what level do the degrees become honorary? And at what age do most competitors stop competing? And were women discouraged from engaging in judo?
Well, okay, so on the competition stuff, I don't know what level at what age but there's kata competition, which I think people do for much longer than the you know, with the fighting stuff. So, but when Fukuda Sensei was doing judo, there was no opportunity for the fighting competitions. There was only kata, and you know, they were sort of casual sparring, but not where it was in competition. And in the film, there is a slightly between Yamaguchi Sensei and Fukuda Sensei, but Eiko Sensei became a champion of judo in the fighting competitions. Mm-hmm. And she had to come to the United States, and she talks in the film about how in order for her to do that type of competition, she kind of had to, like in the beginning, she had to pretend she was a boy, because there was no category for girls to compete in that. And then I think, you know, more and more it became accepted. But Yamaguchi Sensei was, she was a bronze medalist in the '88 Olympics, and that was the first time women's judo was included in the Olympic Games. So that is sort of when I think it became internationally recognized as.
Did Fukuda Sensei demonstrate judo in the '64 Olympics?
Yes, so she was asked to demonstrate the signature kata, the one that you just saw in that little clip. That it's not a combative kata. So it's the way I understand this, is I'm not a judo expert, but is that each move in that kata is taken to its apex, but never over so the throw is not completed. So it's called the gentle kata, Ju no kata. And so but it's a very beautiful and it's a very difficult one. And it's her signature. I mean, I think everybody sort of sees her as the one who was the example of that. And so in the 1964 Olympics, in the opening ceremony of the judo competition, she was asked to demonstrate that. She talks about that in the film when she's in the press conference.
Do we have any more comments? No? Well, if anybody has any other questions to ask, please put them in the chat, but we're going to move on to your more recent projects, which also involve a sport that is very important in Japan and also the US, baseball. And you're doing a couple of really interesting projects on that. So before we watch a clip, can you maybe set us up and talk about how you got into this next project?
I have a friend, Dave Dempsey, whose father, Con Dempsey, was a pitcher for the San Francisco Seals. And I did not know about this particular tour until the Society of Pioneers down in San Francisco had this exhibition that showed all the goodies from the tour. Actually, it was a lot of jackets and happy coats and beautiful photographs. But anyway, so I went to this thing, and I was kind of amazed at what a big deal it was. And then off in the corner of the exhibition was a TV, and there were some movies running. And my friend Dave said, "Oh yeah, my dad took a movie camera, so he took all these movies." And I was like, "Oh my God, I need to make a movie out of this." So I had intended to make this short film about the 1949 tour, which was taken to Japan, the San Francisco Seals, which was the minor league, before the majors came to California. And that team was taken to Japan during the occupation, the Allied occupation post-World War II in 1949. And the team was sent to Japan by General MacArthur in the occupation forces. So it was an official diplomatic send of a baseball team to Japan. So that's how I got interested, and then I started researching and found out that baseball has been in Japan since 1872, and all these other things had gone on. So I started making a bigger film, and that's why we're still making it.
So when did you start?
Well, the first filming was when Masanori Murakami, more commonly known as Mashi, was the first Japanese player to play for the major leagues. And he was a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. And so the Giants had a 50th anniversary event over at what used to be not Oracle Park, but at their Giant Stadium. And so I had got permission to film that. So that's when I started filming it. At that point, I really wasn't sure exactly what the story was going to be, but I thought I better film this because this is my opportunity, otherwise it'll be behind me. So that's when I started, and well, you see the little clip, and the other kind of main character in it is Warren Cromartie, who was a big star in the Montreal Expos, and then he went to Japan right when the free agency became a big deal, and basically the San Francisco Giants got outbid by the Tokyo Giants, and he went to Japan. So anyways, so he's kind of my other big character, and there's a bunch of other things that need to be filmed still, but obviously no filming happened last year.
So you've gotten to meet some of these famous players, right? You got to meet Mashi and Cromartie and any other big names?
Well, I was just on I was moderating a panel just a couple nights ago, and Matt Merton was on it, and Leon Lee. I have been in the clubhouse and, met some of these, well, like you saw Hunter Pence and Native Dawn, and so I have met these guys, not so intimately as having interviewed them like I have with Mashi and Warren and stuff, but yeah, I do get to meet these guys. They're pretty much regular people, but you know. Although I think the funniest thing is like hanging out in the clubhouse because it's basically the locker room. But anyways.
No, we want to hear more. But I know this is still a work in progress. So what other things are you planning to?
Well, we're still searching for archival material. So the footage and the media and news stuff from the past, and also I've been working very closely with Major League Baseball, and they have a huge archive, so I'll be getting a lot of stuff from them. And you know, then we have to go to Japan and get their archival material, which is going to be a little more complicated. But there are a couple people that I still need to interview. So I mean, right now the main thing we're doing is we need to raise more money to finish the film. So we are working on various things about fundraising, and if I could make a plug here, we're looking for corporate sponsorship and partnership with nonprofits, and so we're reaching out to all kinds. So if anybody has any corporations or people that or nonprofits that should be connected with us, ask you to do that, because the sooner we raise the money, the sooner we get to finish the film. So
we're gonna put some links in at the end of this program, so you can find out more about the project and figure out how to donate. And also, if you know anyone who could be at the sponsorship level or partnership level, that would be great. Also, I guess if you have any archival photos, let Yuriko know. And it's funny because baseball is going to be an Olympic sport in Tokyo, right? But then not scheduled to be in Paris 4 years from now, or 3 years.
It hasn't been played since 2008, so it's been
so just for this one.
Yeah, they brought it back. Of course, baseball is such a big deal in Japan, but Major League Baseball is not pausing their season, whereas the Japanese professional baseball will pause their season. So they'll have their top stars, but I think that the Team America is going to be mostly minor leaguers and college. Yeah.
So does that make Japan the favorite?
Well, according to some of the people that I was talking to on the panel the other night, it looks like it is.
Oh yeah, I was watching that panel, and they had the professional players had some really interesting things to say about Japanese baseball compared to American baseball, right? Just the play sort of. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think the thing that they were talking, well, one of the things that Warren brought up is that in Japan, you can end the night and there can be a tie, which, it doesn't happen here.
Just once. One All-Star game, that was it.
Occasionally you end up in the 14th, 15th inning, and then you start wishing that maybe we should have a tie. So that's one huge difference. But I think there's a lot more emphasis on the nuances of baseball and the small ball. So especially, it seems like lately more and more it's all about hitting and power and speed, and like bunting is like sort of like a non-entity anymore. But occasionally someone bunts and you're like, wow, they're doing, or they make the pitcher bunt because they don't really want to strike out or whatever. But yeah, in Japan, apparently in all their stats, there's actually a bunting stat.
Wow.
Which definitely doesn't exist here. So, that's a big difference, I think. And there's a lot of difference in the way the fans, there's a whole like cheering section that you have to try out for, and you have to know all the songs and the cheers before you can be selected to be in the cheering section. It's counter to what you think of as being, Japan is sort of a staid kind of quiet, but the baseball stadiums are very loud, lots of cheering, and a lot of the sort of synchronized singing, cheering stuff. So yeah, going to a game is very different.
It is different, and I think they have a very strong high school culture, right? Yes. Koshien. So I think that's where it starts too. But this mania has started since 1872. I mean, I had
Well,
no
I think
idea.
I don't think there was a high school baseball maybe back then, but it really caught on very quickly and became very popular. And it started in the sort of high schools and post-secondary. That was where it first became the most popular.
Well, so I think we're all going to love to watch this. So hopefully we'll keep track of your progress. But I want to talk about this other project that grew out of the main project, which I think will be of interest to our audience as we discuss.
Well, so you talk about World War II and baseball, and well, most of this audience knows that all 10 internment camps had baseball being played. And I knew that, and I've been working very closely with Kerry Nakagawa, and Kerry is, has the wealth of information about baseball in that era. And so I always felt like there was so much more than we were going to be able to cover in this film, because we're spanning such a long period of time. And then I had an opportunity to write it up, and I got a National Parks grant. So there's actually a big chunk of money now to do a short film, which we pulled out of the longer film and expanded upon the whole concept of baseball being played during World War II by Japanese Americans in the camps. And there's most of it is sort of centered around Gila River in Arizona. And there's a guy there, Bill Staples, who's been doing a lot of research about that, also with Kerry. But so now we're working on that as a film, a short film, which should probably be about 20 to 30 minutes about that.
How do you do two projects at the same time like that?
Well, I have a lot of help now. I have interns. No, I have an associate producer, and well, for those two films, there's some overlap. So we're about to, in a couple months, we're going to be filming an interview of Kerry Nakagawa, and so that'll cover for that. Some of the archival research will cover for both films, but I mean, we just have to. It's like doing any other job where you've got different projects. You try and prioritize what has to be done and which deadlines are for which project, and it keeps me busy.
Jill, what's your role in this?
You've been helping with research and stuff, pointing me towards people and organizations.
I think J-Sei distracted me, so.
Yeah, keeping you busy?
Yeah, I helped early on, so that was fun, and we were applying for grants at the time, so the very early stages, before our filming started. And then Yuriko went and started doing the filming. Yeah, but I got to meet Mashi and attend.
Oh, you did?
Right.
The game, that first, 50th anniversary game. Yeah, so it was fun. I didn't get to go into the dugout.
That's something I would like to do. So I would assume that Kerry Yo must be a tremendous resource for that, right?
He's great. Yeah, he's the keeper of the history, and I can't wait to get him on camera, because often he's the one doing the research and the producing and stuff, but now you put him front row and center, telling me all these stories and sort of imparting his wisdom. And he's very colorful. And
well, when Mashi threw out the baseball, remember, Kerry wore his uncle's Fresno uniform and was a catcher.
Oh,
received it.
Yeah, Kerry was walking around with this flannel old baseball uniform, and the whole time we were like in the tunnels, like going from one, and Mashi had on a suit with a Giants tie, but he had just a regular suit on, whereas Kerry was walking around in this like time period costume, and people kept pulling him over and going, "Who are you? What are you doing?"
That's a great uniform. Boy.
It is. It's a great uniform.
Although he might have been sweating a little bit, those old wool ones, right? Kind of scratchy. You know, there's one person who was in Diamond Diplomacy who I want to ask about too. That's Kathy Harada.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I never met Kathy. Actually, Rob Fitz, he's met him, and I think Whiting has met him. But actually, some of that archival material, I think some of it was audio recordings that Rob had done when he was interviewing for his book. But Carrie called me one day and said, I found some videotapes and I'm just gonna mail them to you. He goes, I think they're Cappy.
No.
And they've been sitting on some shelf and he hadn't seen them for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years or something. And it was after Cappy had passed away. And he said, I don't know what they are and I can't even play them because I don't have anything to play. Because they were old format tapes. And I said, Carrie, I said, are those the only copies? And he said, yeah, but I'm just going to send them to you because I don't have any way of looking at them. So he mailed them to me. And I'm like, these are precious. I mean, I don't know what they are. And this is the only copy. So I remember I had something to play it on. So I immediately made a copy of it just so that it wouldn't be the only thing. And I had it sent out to have it professionally transferred. So that I would have a digital copy. But, you know, he just was talking about all kinds of things. Like he talked about like when Babe Ruth showed up in California. I mean, I can't remember all the little details, but he had lots of great stories that will never make it into the film. But it was just so funny that Carrie found these tapes and he didn't know what it was. He goes, I'm just going to mail them.
Well, sometimes serendipity like that is the best find, right?
And that's why, like, I still have VHS players and high-A players, and because people, you know, archival material shows up in different formats, and you have to have a way of looking at it. Sometimes I have to take it somewhere and have somebody else transfer it or play it.
Yes, it is important in your line of work. So again, I'm calling out to everybody out in the audience. If you have some old materials.
Yeah, if anybody has archival of baseball being played in the camps, or stories, or uniforms, or you know, that would be helpful.
Yeah, back in April we showed. Were you in the audience for movie night? We showed American Pastime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Had you seen that movie before?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a great movie.
Yeah. And Carrie was one of the producers for it, so. In fact, I think I have a DVD with his signature.
Oh. So we have just a little clip, a very short, about 30-second clip, but we're seeing it for the first time. This is a world premiere, guys.
And this is like a little secret thing, so you guys get a special treat.
Yes, the ultimate teaser. But do you want to tee that up?
Well, so when you're making a movie, well, kind of like the Manjiro thing, that where, you know, you don't have live people alive to talk about it, and you can't go out and film it. You just have to collect the old stuff that, you know, and put it together. But often it's bits and pieces. We have some illustrations done by Chura Iwata, and then we have Dorothea Lange and Ansel Adams photos, along with lots of other like home movies and things that have been collected over the years. But it's always a challenge to kind of edit that together, and also to be able to talk about something that you don't have the material for. So I wanted to be able to use animation. This time not stop motion, but I've been working with this talented young woman who likes to do sort of hand illustration stuff. And I thought that'd be a nice way to like take the illustrations that we have and then edit them with footage and stuff. So we took a photo and we created this little animation that is, the idea is to look at a photo and think, okay, this is a piece of normal life. And then you understand that, yes, it was normal life, but it was happening behind the barbed wire in the camps, and where you weren't free to go beyond the walls. And so we created this little sample, which hopefully will become a technique that we can use in the film. Well, so that photo is one of Dorothea Lange's photos, which were actually censored and locked up for many years because and that's not one of the more controversial ones, but Dorothea Lange's work is about showing life as it actually is, as opposed to how somebody wants you to portray it. So there was a lot of stuff that showed the suffering and the sort of underside of what was going on. So they basically censored the stuff. So, but there are photos like that where when you just look at it and you look at a close-up of it, it just kind of does look like, oh, it's a bunch of people playing baseball, and you know, the woman with the baby carriage, and then of course, you know, as you pull out, you see the barracks in the background. But we wanted to put the barbed wire in to sort of emphasize the fact that all these things that we might be showing, whether it's the baseball or people eating dinner or gardening or sewing or dancing, all was happening in those confines. And it's an ability for us to kind of remind people in the film that, you know, this is where it was happening, and to kind of dramatize it a little bit. So, and the hope is that it will help us edit stuff together so that it has a feeling of continuity, as opposed to, you know, one photo here that doesn't really match that photo there, and then all of a sudden there's movies. And so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it does a couple things. One is it's beautiful. I mean, I love that part where kind of the mountains explode behind it. That's just really lovely. But also I can see where when you have a lot of these static images, you want to try to create some dynamic, right, in it. So that seems like a great way to make the eye kind of look all over instead of just staring at the one picture.
It's a way to bring it to life, I guess. And you know, in our case, you know, we're not pretending not to do this. We're putting some editorial message into the images that we are being able to share. So
yeah, and I have seen that photo of Dorothea Lange's before, so it's to take it's kind of an iconic photo and then to sort of rework it so that you think about it differently.
Yeah, it is really interesting because I've seen a ton of internment films, and you see the same footage over and over and over again, and sometimes you just can't help but use some of these things because they are very meaningful and symbolic of things. So if there's a way that we can take it and contextualize it and make it a part of our film and not just the image that we see in everyone else's film, that's another thing that I think we would try to do.
So has anyone posted any questions about either diamond diplomacy or baseball behind barbed wire or judo or Mrs. Judo?
So Ellen says, so creative seeing the wire fence coming into play after you see the baseball field and interns watching. And I wonder if Ellen or others, you might have some baseball stories just to share with you.
Well, it's just a play on being able to talk about diplomacy through baseball and alliterative.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah. Hi, Ellen.
Hi. Well, I'll just say that my father used to play baseball for UCLA at the same time he was playing tennis for UCLA. But his tennis coach told him that you have to choose one or over the other because you're breaking all your fingers. But at that time, Japanese college players really weren't on the team, shall we say. There was still a lot of discrimination then. So you didn't see Asian or Black people really get to play first squad. That's all I'll just say. And by the time we got to Topaz, he was a married man, had my brother, first child, and I was on the way. So he wasn't playing baseball while he was in camp. He was going out to the field to farm produce to make a little money so that he'd have something when he got out of camp. That was it. Yeah.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
Well, there's some good stories about like building the baseball fields, especially at Gila River, and about how they would do things like they would reroute all the piping so that they could, like, they needed to spray down the fields and settle the dust. And so I guess at night people weren't doing laundry anymore, so they would sneak all the water from the laundry room and take it out to the fields and squirt them down. And then there was one story about how they actually stole the fence posts, like every other fence post from the barbed wire fence, so they could use that to build like the structure of the stands and the backstop.
I've never heard that.
I mean, there's some really great stories. And then at Gila River, there was a high school team in the camp, and then there was the Arizona State champion high school team, and that team came in and they played each other. So this will be part of the film and stuff. But and then actually the Gila River team ended up winning the game. But there's all these great stories about that. And there were some of the players were allowed to travel from like Arizona up to Heart Mountain to play them. And
the person at Gila River, Zenny Muno,
can you choose any?
Was he a player before?
Yeah, but I think by the time he was in the camp, it was really his sons who were sort of bigger players. I mean, I think there still was an older adult team, but his sons were in high school, so they were like the
okay. Then I think that was the basis for the American Pastime story, right?
Yeah, I think that was kind of cool. But Zenimura was the guy who really decided that this had to be a big deal. And so they built this big, nice, beautiful field, and it had stands, and it had, I think they even had like specially marked seats. Like some of the seats were special and you had to pay more money for them.
You had to pay admission?
Well, I guess they were doing that, and they were collecting money. And then they actually had a pool of money to, like, they paid a couple of the Negro League teams to come in. They had professional baseball teams come in and play. So, I mean, there was a lot of effort going into this.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So again, this is going to be a great story. Can't wait. So we can take a few last questions. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up the evening and let Yuriko go back home. But I was going to ask Miles if you could put in, we have some links.
We're John has his, John Fukida's in the audience.
Oh,
Yuriko.
Hi, John.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I just thank you again for showing Mrs. Judo at San Francisco State several years ago. It was a big hit, as you know. But a little factoid I just learned from reading the newsletter from the Heart Mountain Camp organization. I just read it today that there were existing Japanese Americans living in Wyoming prior to the war, and there was a Wyoming Japanese baseball team.
In Wyoming, wow.
In Wyoming, prior to the war, pre-camp, and they played teams from Tijuana and Vancouver. And I've never heard this before.
Huh. So if they were already living in Wyoming, they probably did not have to go to,
Correct.
They didn't have to be interned.
They were
So
not
John,
interned.
Do you know about Rob Fitz's new book about J-Sei baseball?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I'll have to send you a link
Okay.
because it's pretty good J-Sei history, early 1900s Japanese immigrating. But Rob found some early baseball teams that go way back to the early 1900s.
Yeah. So I thought this was quite fascinating. I'll send you a copy of this.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks, John. Any other comments? Hey, Miles, can you put those links in the, oh, did you already? Thanks. So we have a link so that you can watch Mrs. Judo this weekend if you haven't already, and a couple of other links to look up Diamond Diplomacy on its website, and also with where you can make donations, and maybe
you can sign up for our newsletter.
The newsletter, yes, to keep tabs on its progress. Do you have what's your aspiration for this? When do you want to?
Well, I'm not even going to pretend anymore. I was hoping to get it out in 2022
because next year
is the 150th anniversary of the arrival of baseball in Japan. But I think if it's finished at the end of 2022, I think it'll probably more likely be out in 23. But it's all dependent on how quickly we can get the money together, really. But if you sign up for the newsletter, not only can you keep up with what we're doing, but all these other little things that come up. But sometimes we put in things like suggestions for baseball movies and baseball books and recipes.
Recipes?
We've been doing all these goofy things all through the pandemic. So we might, put in some other fun things too.
So I asked Eileen to turn her video on. She can share some of her comments. She says, "Thank you for your work here."
Hi, Eileen.
Eileen.
Hi. Yes, I really want to say I think it's a tremendous contribution you're making, especially at this time when at my age I didn't think I'd be thinking about my identity anymore. Like I thought I had figured it all out. We started in college, thinking, but in today's climate with all the anti-Asian things that are going down, it's just good to know people are working in the field you're working in and can reach an audience that might not otherwise be reached. So I do feel very grateful.
Well, thank you for saying that. Certainly in my industry of documentary filmmaking in general, but documentary filmmaking, there's been a lot of dialogue around sort of authorship and sharing stories of communities that in the past have not been shared so much. So
yeah.
Okay. Any other last comments? Everybody can turn your videos on and unmute yourselves and say hey and wave and tell Yuriko how much you liked tonight's program. Yeah, good job.
Thank you for joining. It's fun to have everyone there.
And it worked. This all worked.
Yeah, this new high technology.
Wow.
Like being in a TV studio.
Right? We were sort of like, I don't watch TV talk shows. And so far, I can't think of a single TV host I can name who isn't controversial. Like I don't want to be Charlie Rose. I don't want to be Ellen. I don't want to be
Oprah. Can
I be Oprah? That would be great.
Yeah.
I would love to be one of the wealthiest women in the world. Sure. So maybe we'll do this next month. We'll see how that goes. We're having another special guest filmmaker join us. So everybody put August 13th on your calendars. That's going to be our next movie night. And if nobody else has any comments, then I will say thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Miles, and did a fabulous job.
Nice technical.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.